So, what is the smallest county in England? Well, the answer to this is a little complex, but for most of its history, it was Rutland. This county still exists today and is arguably the most unique county of them all. But what makes it so special, besides its diminutive size? Well, allow me to explain with a virtual tour. As there are just two towns in Rutland, we'll start in the county town of Oakham and make our way to the other town, namely Uppingham. But rather than take the direct route, which would be a drab walk straight along the A6003, we're taking the scenic route around a serene reservoir via 7 stunning quintessential English villages. So welcome to Oakham, Rutland's largest settlement with a population of around 12,000. That may not sound like a lot, but it is over a quarter of the population of the entire county. Stone cottages with thatched roofs set the tone surprisingly well for what will follow in the villages. As for the history of Oakham, well, that centres largely around Oakham Castle, an unusual looking castle with an even more unusual centuries-old tradition attached. Visitors from the aristocracy would forfeit a horseshoe to the lord of the manor of Oakham on their first visit to the town. The horseshoes would end up in the castle's great hall, which holds over 200 to this day, the oldest coming courtesy of Edward IV in 1470. Also of note is Oakham School, particularly due to its rivalry with Uppingham School, but I'll elaborate on this later. Oakham also boasts Rutland's single solitary railway station, but where we're going, we don't need railway tracks. In fact, that could easily be the county motto, although its actual motto is Multum in Parvo, Latin for much in little. About 5 miles to the east is the village of Exton. Now, all in all, there are around 50 villages in Rutland, but one that's claimed frequently to be among its finest is Exton. This is subjective, of course, but the thatched stone cottages, surrounded by greenery, embody the spirit of the county as a whole, which will become increasingly evident as we progress. Rutland, by the way, is England's smallest historic county, though this statement requires further clarification. The smallest county in England today is the City of London, i.e. the square mile, followed by Bristol, which, as well as being a city, has been a county in its own right since 1996. Then there's the Isle of Wight, which in 1890 became a county in itself, independent of Hampshire. Both Rutland and the Isle of Wight are approximately 150 square miles. As to which is smaller of the two, well, some claim that it depends on whether it's high tide or low tide, but take that one with a pinch of salt. In 1974, Rutland was absorbed into Leicestershire, but was reinstated as a county in 1997, something which has yet eluded other former counties such as Huntingdonshire, Cumberland, Westmoreland, etc. But having existed since the 12th century or earlier, Rutland can rightly claim the title of smallest historic county in England, and with that bit of housekeeping out of the way, it's time to move on to the next village. And so we arrive in Uppingham, just over 2 miles to the southeast, and once again stone thatched cottages are the order of the day. In this case they're set against the pleasant backdrop of the Church of St. Peter dating back to the 13th century, one of several fine parish churches in the county, and about a mile to the west of Uppingham is one of the county's star attractions. Rutland Water. Set in the very centre of the county is England's largest man-made lake by surface area. This nature reserve may indeed be a pleasant spot for boat trips, fishing, cycling, birdwatching and so forth, but it has an unexpected backstory. Its construction began in 1971 and concluded in 1975, although its filling took a further 4 years. To facilitate its creation, an entire village was flooded. Yep, you heard me right. The village of Nether Hambleton was demolished prior to being submerged, with the locals having to be relocated. 2 other villages were also affected, namely Middle Hambleton, which was partly demolished, and Upper Hambleton, which is now a peninsula. One building in particular narrowly escaped destruction, that being the former Church of St. Matthew, which brings us to our third village, Normanton. With population estimates of around 24, this really is just a handful of houses and a church. Well, except the church has an extraordinary history. Built in the 1820s over the foundations of its 14th century predecessor, along with additions from 1911, it was deconsecrated in 1970 prior to the construction of the reservoir. A public outcry kept it alive, with the forthcoming solution being to surround it with a protective layer of stone and rubble, along with a concrete cap just below the windows. A causeway was then built to connect it to the shore. All this, plus its incidental resemblance of a boat from a distance, make for the ideal aesthetic for its current function, a wedding venue. Stepping away from the reservoir takes us almost immediately to our fourth village, Edith Weston. Named after Edith of Wessex, Queen of Edward the Confessor and sister of Harold Godwinson, it follows then that the village, bearing her Christian name, appears in the Domesday Book of 1086. The parish church, dedicated to St Mary, dating back to the 12th century, is of a standard we'd come to expect by now in Rutland. Also typical of the county as a whole seen here is a certain style of roofing. Village number 5, a mile and a half to the southwest, is Linden. Now, this may appear like little more than a few houses along a winding country lane. Well, that's because it is, although St Martin's Church from the 13th century is noteworthy. Continuing southwest brings us to our 6th village, and one with a surprisingly striking name at that. Wing. An information panel in the village informs us that this name is derived from Old Norse vengi, meaning field. This would imply its origins as a settlement go back to around the 9th century, when the Danish Vikings colonised a large portion of the England of today, particularly the East Midlands region, of which Rutland is a part. Of course, there's no surviving Viking architecture here, and the Great Heathen Army, as the Anglo-Saxons coined them, certainly wouldn't have approved of the parish church of St Peter and St Paul. And a little over a mile to the west is our 7th and final village before we make it to town number 2, Preston. Now, at the risk of stating the obvious, Preston, Rutland is a far cry from its namesake city in Lancashire. With a population of around 200, this has all the hallmarks of a Rutland village. Fine stone houses, a stunning parish church, which is also dedicated to St Peter and St Paul as it happens, and of course, a bit of thatched roofing for good measure. And with that, we proceed just under 2 miles south to our final destination, the town of Uppingham. With a population of just over 4,000, this has all the small market town charm you could ask for in a county such as this. An immaculate high street lined with independent shops and a marketplace with ashlar stone buildings rivaling some of the finest streets in Bath, overlooked by the church of, guess who? St Peter and St Paul, helped to set this apart as one of the finest looking small towns in England. And that's before I even mention the architectural standout, Uppingham School. This has a close rivalry with Oakham School, and an almost identical origin at that. Both were founded in 1584 by Robert Johnson, Archdeacon of Leicester, and think what you will about fee-charging public schools, it's hard to find a building as grand as this outside of Oxford or Cambridge. Direct buses to and from Leicester, and a few of the neighbouring settlements, helped somewhat to compensate for Uppingham's lack of a railway station. So in closing, what makes England's smallest historic county so unique? Well, as we've seen, this is a county of 2 towns, 1 railway station, 1 large reservoir with an underwater village beneath the surface, and a whole lot of country lanes and thatched roofs. A county that lives up to its motto, multum in parvo, or much in little. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.